I'm Clinton Yates, and I'm the sexiest Star Wars fan you know. Ask your mama.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Welcome to episode number 198 of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I'm one of your hosts, Pete Fletzer, and boy, do we have a treat for you this week. This week, Nick and I had the pleasure of sitting down with the one and only Clinton Yates from ESPN and ESPN's official Star Wars podcast called Never Tell Me the Odds. We dove deep into Clinton's Star Wars origin story. We explored the state of fandom, and we even had a little bit of fun imagining which Star Wars characters would excel in various sports positions, from MLB closers to NBA point guards. But wait, folks, there's more. This is just part one of our epic conversation with Clinton, so be sure to stay tuned for next week's bonus episode where we unleash the 10 Questions segment on him. So trust me, you are not going to want to miss it. And now, before we deep dive into the galaxy far, far away, let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. You can connect with us across various platforms. You can visit our website at the SSWnetwork.com for everything you need to know about the show and all of our shows. You can follow us on TikTok at the SSW Network. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the SSW Network for all the latest updates. And you can join the conversation on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at the SSW Network and at ATGcast. Feeling a little bit of extra supportive? Well, consider backing us on Patreon at patreon.com/the SSW For as little as $3 a month, you'll get free swag, early access to shows, plus a private link to join us when we record with our celebrity guests, like for this week's show. Every bit of support helps keep the keeps the lights on. Get that little joke there? Yeah, that was fun. Well, you got something else on your mind? Leave us a voicemail at 504-321-1501. Your voice matters to us. And don't forget, every Thursday, catch our live show, ATG Live, on our YouTube channel. This week, we've got a special guest, Brandon Wynerdy from Talking Bay 94 will be joining us for all the latest Star Wars news and your voicemails, once again at 504-321-1501. Now let's talk about our guest, Clinton Yates, a columnist, a television commentator, and a host for ESPN. His journey through the intersection of sports, race, and culture has captivated audiences worldwide. From his compelling profiles on athletes like Kyler Murray and Mookie Betts to his insightful commentary on ESPN programs like Around the Horn and Outside the Lines, Clinton's impact resonates far beyond the sports arena. With a career spanning the Washington Post, ESPN Radio, and beyond, Clinton's voice is a beacon of authenticity and insight into today's media landscape. So, listeners, let's get ready to embark on an unforgettable journey through the galaxy with our friend Clinton Yates at our side. Trust me, it's a ride you don't want to miss. Well, we are hanging out with Clinton Yates from ESPN, journalist, columnist, all kinds of things. Clinton, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm well. I'm doing good because I'm back off the road from coming from Florida, which was fantastic, and so things are good.
Clinton, for those that may not know you, maybe give us a little bit of your background. We know you from ESPN, and we also know you from your Never Tell Me the Odds podcast with our friend Art Ocal.
I'm wearing the hoodie.
See, I need a hoodie. I got to get a hoodie.
No, sir, they are team issue. At the moment, they are team issue, but they are very soft and they're very comfortable. So,
all right. Well, give us a little bit about your background.
So my name is Clinton Yates. I'm a journalist. This is the only job I've ever had ever since I stopped doing other jobs, and that they started paying me for this, and I was lucky enough. And I say that for a reason, to not ever stop doing it. And here's why that comes up, is that I consider my job as a storyteller. So that's an important just base to set. But I'm from DC. I don't really do a lot of human fans' origin stories because I don't know, and it doesn't really matter to me in terms of acceptance. but I'm 42 years old. I had cable ever since my parents got divorced when I was 10. So I watched a lot of TV, sat in the basement, and my dad showed me Star Wars one day, and I was like, we're going to have to keep watching these. And that's what we did. You know, I was never old enough to have ever seen the movies, episodes 4 through 6 in theaters. That just wasn't a thing. You know, you saw them on TV, you watched them on VHS. And every day after third grade, which was the year that the big thing I just mentioned happened, I'd come home and I'd watch. I mean, there was no way I was getting through all of episode 4 every day after school. So I would queue up the Trench Run because it was, you know, pretty inspirational. The lines were kind of funny. I liked, you know, at that age, did I know what I was looking at? Perhaps not, but I really liked what we'll just call the art direction. It looked cool. And, you know, all of the, you know, composition of how the ships did everything. I mean, it wasn't just a story for me. It was a masterpiece as a little kid. And so, you know, I just remember how much I connected to that as a child and how that impacted my storytelling. I don't know that I have some huge empire, oh my God, my life changed when I found out story. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just not that, because I remember what was so cool about that particular portion of the story was that it was like to drop something like that and let it not be the end of something. Like it's easily the best cliffhanger in all of cinematic history, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. You know, moving right along. And so I was like, all right, well, here we go. And anyway, long story short, when I ended up, you know, I went to high school in the 90s. So 1, 2, 3 came out when I was in high school. And, you know, look, what people think about that, those I did see in the theater, we can get into that later. But where it went to was I ended up being a volunteer at the Magic of Myth, which was the Smithsonian Institution's Star Wars installation at the National Air and Space Museum, which, again, I'm from DC. This was not down the street, but this was an accessible place for me to do something, to spend time, to make sure I got out of high school, you know. And I was like, yeah, I'll sit and bang the clicker just to count people if I can look at what's in the exhibit. And I'll, you know, cut this particular portion of it short, but it had one part that was a sort of film situation in terms of like film analysis that broke down all of Lucas's, you know, motivations and sort of origins of how he got to the costumes and all that. And then the other side was the costumes and the models, like the actual ones. And so people would just kind of pass through, understandably. But if you were there for a long time, you got kind of exposed to being able to look at them, and you got to look at them before hours and after hours. And that to me was a big connection point in terms of what it really meant to my life from a character standpoint and a lot of the rest. So yes, big fan. I'm not going to say that I don't play the video games. I've never read the comic books, and I don't read the books. I watch the TV shows. I've seen all of the animated stuff, and I've seen all the movies. That's the fan I am.
And I want to dig in a little bit. You talked about being a storyteller, and you also mentioned kind of this idea of culture, being a part of that exhibit at the Smithsonian, being in Washington, D.C. itself, working at the Washington Post, as I know you did. Like, that's really a cross-section of culture in this country. And a part of what you did, and a part of your work in your resume, is that you launched The Undefeated, which focuses on the connections between sports, race, and culture. And Star Wars absolutely fits into that. Tell us a little bit about kind of the intersection of Star Wars and culture, and how that maybe informs some of the work you've done with Undefeated.
So, to me, what Star Wars was an avenue to a galaxy, not even a pun, and certainly intended, that everybody could be in without a reason necessarily. And that started when I was at the Washington Post. I mean, at the Post, I wrote about a lot of pop culture things. And as a section editor, I, you know, put together a lot of the just general goings on of pop culture of the day or the week or whatever it was. And so when I finally started writing, I was like, look, and Twitter came about. I was like, I'm just going to talk about what I choose to talk about. And I tweeted a lot about Star Wars. I mean, it was just an obvious move. A lot was coming out at the time. it was that time when they would drop previews that would have 90 scenes and 30 of them wouldn't even be in the movie. And you're like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But I understand productions are what they are. But my point is that I was, watching a lot of things. And so when I finally got the opportunity to write about whatever I wanted, my homie, David Betancourt, who is one of the Washington Post, as far as I'm concerned, best writers as far as pop culture has ever had, because he covered comics and the extension of that world. And he was my guy that got me into early Star Wars screenings. Very important to the situation. I don't mean that in terms of props. I mean that in terms of it meant you had to take it seriously. And so by the time I got to this point in life, I was like, look, as a person that, covers my city in DC at the Post, great. I'd love to be able to see this. By the time I got to ESPN and The Undefeated, the lens through which I was talking about black folks was kind of a given, I think. Sam Jackson and all these other people. And it was just something that people knew that I did. So I went, dare I say, a touch rogue on this. And I was just like, I will be writing about Star Wars. Please and thank you, because it matters to me. And it helped a lot that we're in the Disney universe, something we can get to in a second. And it still helps. I was very, very honored to be able to carry that over from one publication of my life to another in terms of why it mattered. And, the stories that have developed around every single thing that's happened between trilogies and between characters and actors. It's been one of those things that if it didn't come naturally to me, I wouldn't do it. But I mean, it does. I like it. So I try to cover it as best I can. It's not like anything else in that regard. It's just the only thing that I really care about the most. That's not sports.
You talked about sports, obviously, and ESPN, the whole thing. And I definitely want to talk a little bit about the ESPN Disney connection. But, when I was a kid, I was, and Nick and I are of a similar, it seems like we're all in that sort of Generation X kind of zone, just different pieces of it.
I'm younger than you, self-important humans. Okay.
Wait a minute. So you're
a millennial. I am claiming it. Relax. I graduated in high school in 1999. All right.
Okay. Wait, did a millennial just tell us to calm down? I
yes.
don't know where this is going, but it's going to get rough. It's going to get rough.
I like it.
Were kids, when I was a kid, like Star Wars was the nerdy thing. And it was like that sort of separate piece. And I just talked to Arda about this the other day. There was very few of us who were into sports. I played hockey. I played baseball. My best friend played baseball, but we were still Star Wars guys. But there was that separation. When did it, I guess, based on the generational difference there, was it always cool to be into both? Because you were coming in when sort of that dark time, right?
Pre-prequels. We asked Ryan Blaney this question on our pod, because I had to say that's a generation. Was it cool? And for me, it wasn't that it was cool. No, I didn't have some whole squad of humans that loved Star Wars, but it also wasn't whack. You know what I'm saying? Right. People like Star Wars, bro. If you didn't have a Star Wars trilogy at your crib, what were you doing? You know what I mean? Obviously you have it, whether or not you know every intricate detail of, insert storyline here or whatever battle plans you want. That wasn't the point. The point was some people liked it more than others, and I liked it more than most. And, the reason why I mentioned the Smithsonian exhibit is because that was a point where I was really like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. There's a whole other life around this that isn't just about being the, according to Hoyle, nerd, And so that was a big part of it to me. And again, right after I got out of high school, 1, 2, 3 came out. So there was an element of pop culture right now-ness that I think drew a lot of people in. And I don't mean to keep referencing Ryan Blaney, but he was like, yeah, episode 1 is my favorite episode. And it's that makes absolute sense. You are the age that you are. And I was at that point in my life where I was like, okay, I get it. Certain characters, Jar Jar, whatever, don't necessarily work for me. But at the same time, I was just old enough to be let's not act like Star Wars was Shakespeare, bro. You know what I'm saying? This was already pretty camp, and that was the fun part. And so it wasn't hard for me to connect the first trilogy to the second in the context of, if you'd made this now, of course, this is what it would look like. I live in the world. Like, and so pod racing, not touchable. You know what I'm saying? Like, there were things that happened that were great. And if you want to get all existential about it and ask me what I think, about the development of Anakin's character and, this, that, and the third, we can get into that. But like, yeah, it worked for me. I enjoyed it. And not because I felt like I was some puritanical Lucasfilm acolyte, not even close. It was just like, I knew both sides. It works for me. I'm not necessarily saying that it anchored my fandom in anything, because that had already happened, but I don't argue with people about order anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me in terms of the larger context of what the storylines are about.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, because as we, you said that when you got onto Twitter, you were talking Star Wars and Twitter, Star Wars and social media have this really kind of ugly, abusive relationship. So, how do you respond to that? Because you made a great point. Yeah. If Empire came out today, I wrote a fun little article on our website where I did a review of Empire Strikes Back. If it was written by some of the angry nerds today, and they would have hated it. They would have ripped it apart. There was so much going on with that. But how do you respond to that? Do you get involved in any of that? Do you kind of just feel like, do you throw your hands up? How do you handle it?
There was a time that I did. There was a time that I did, until I realized that it was a community that was not worth my day-to-day engagement. But I don't mean that in terms of like dismissiveness. I mean, I get it. Everybody's a fan. People are all out there. But once I realized that the people that didn't understand that in order for the franchise, never mind like I don't know how to say this, I sound like a total cornball, but like without like the ability of the Force, meaning the story to continue, like new things had to happen, guys. Like we weren't going to sit around watching 3 movies for the rest of our living existences. Like that was never going to be something that would have made any of this cool. And so, look, if you weren't in a movie theater when the double blade lightsaber came out and you didn't like it, sorry, buddy. Because that was awesome as far as I was concerned at that age, and all this other stuff. So I sort of feel like for the people that did not have the creative or emotional wherewithal to enjoy certain parts of the franchise, and I'm not saying that as a shill. I mean, I've said this long before, and there's certain things there's a lot of things I don't like about certain parts of the storytelling, certain parts of various rollouts, but that's not really the point. There's a lot of things I don't like about a lot of leagues. You know what I'm saying? If we're really getting serious, the NFL doesn't make me happy every day, down to Major League Baseball, which I, in some ways, make a living about explaining what's going wrong. So in order for me to enjoy something, I don't have to think that every part of it is a smooth running operation. And to me, that was where I found out about myself. I was like, you know what? This is more fun if I like it. And for a lot of people, I think that they didn't really understand that part about themselves, but they had defined their identities that way. And it's like, man, what a waste of time. That's unfortunate. You know what I mean? I get it. If it really screwed you up that much to see the way the certain characters, etc., developed, well, I'm sorry, buddy, but I'm just not on that boat.
I was thinking, as you mentioned, talking about story, and you obviously are very much a story person. You refer to yourself as a storyteller. Story is obviously integral to any kind of movie, any kind of thing, but Lucas kind of made it a cornerstone. I feel like we started talking more about storytelling, the hero's journey, all these kind of the Campbellian, myths that go along with that. For me, when I think about Star Wars and sports, there's that natural, you have athletes who go on hero's journeys. They go, they start a career, they go through hard times, they struggle, they hit the peak, they hit the whatever. I was reading on Twitter today, you were writing about, and I'm going to get his name wrong, Raja Karuth, winning, this truck series. This guy's on a hero's journey of his own right now. You work with athletes, you talk to athletes. Is that something, because we hear more and more all the time, there's lots of Star Wars fans that are professional athletes. And I wonder if that excitement as a kid, watching those heroes go through those journeys, inspired them to go on the journey they're on themselves. And have you had thoughts about that, conversations with some of these athletes? You talked about Blaney in the podcast. which is a great episode.
Thank you.
You know, does that tie together, you know, the story, the hero's journey as an athlete and the way we see it in Star Wars?
It does, but it's just one part. And think about it this way. If we're going to say, like I mentioned before, the trench run is the hero's journey, let's think about all the people on the base, your boy in the tower. Let's think about, I don't know, 3PO hoping that R2 comes back. Like, the ancillary characters of that are just as important as everybody else. And I say that as a member of the media who covers the athletes making the hero's journey. And that's an important distinction because to me, I will never forget what the most interesting by far part about the first trilogy was, having ingested 4 through 6, was like, yo, what are all these other people doing? Like, you just got people, like there's a whole city out there. And of course, not, you're just looking at other humans. Like, yeah, the hero's journey was a part of it in terms of the draw as a kid and as somebody that didn't necessarily understand the larger outside world outside of primary characters. But once I grew up a little and I was like, damn, they've got to create entire places that aren't just visual. Like this has to be a thing. And so my understanding of the lore, I got Star Wars timeline, this is 10 times more complicated than the Bible by a lot. Yes. You know what I'm saying? And like, I peruse through it every once in a while just to give myself a look. And once I sort of grew a little bit out of the world, stopped watching Star Wars in my basement, and maybe we're watching it in other people's basements versus movie theaters, I was like, yo, if they really decided to mine this, the hero's journey would be a great thing to be there, but the rest is got to be something, you know? And that's where I think at this age and stage of my life, I'm so glad that they found an avenue to do that. Whether or not I think it's good, bad, or ugly, I happen to think a lot of it is great. I'm just glad it's there more so than anything. And that's a real blessing as somebody that, like I said, I watch news, I watch sports, and I watch Star Wars. That's what I watch. My actual moment that matters, where this changed me as a human, as a consumer, as a journalist, as like a fan, no doubt about it, was Rogue One. This is where everything changed for me. This is when I had first been at Anscape. I was still going, what's now Anscape, what was The Undefeated. I was still going with my man David to these press reviews, and the story versus episode thing wasn't entirely clear as to what that was going to mean. And Rogue One, mark it down, kiddos, is absolutely the best film in the series for me. It's not close. And I don't mean that to diminish other things. I mean that to say as such. At the time of my life, based on the way the storyline was going, the way that hit in terms of what I needed versus what I thought I wanted, bisected versus what we got, I lost my mind. I was like, we got nobody with the Force, technically. We don't need these bloodlines of various individuals in palace intrigue. No. We just got a couple people out in the streets that are doing a lot, and this is the best action movie I've seen in forever. And that, to me, I did not know it until I saw it. I was like, I need way more of this. I do not need people, again, in palaces on the biggest ships in the world. I need interior middle management issues with what's happening around these planets. Never mind that story with a kick in the nuts that really just was, I mean, again, I was in the movie theater. It's a press preview. You're not supposed to talk. Not that I don't go to movie theaters where people aren't supposed to talk, but I go to plenty where people do. And they get through, you know, the download sequence. And like, if you're watching the film and you're not necessarily, I don't want to say paying attention, but if you're not a big Star Wars fan, you don't necessarily know what you're looking at. And I remember I yelled out, holy shit, the white walls. And I started punching David because I was like, that's obviously the shuttle. And I freaked out. Like I freaked out. I jumped up and I was just cheering. Like it was the most unprofessional thing I've done. pretty much ever in a context like that because it was that good to me. And so that was the point when I was like, you know what? If they can figure this part of it out, they got a whole string of things that are really going to be available and fun depending on how they go with it. So when you look at like the Visions of the world and I don't know, Lego Star Wars or whatever, you know, you're like, yeah, I don't need the super important hero journey every time. That's there.
Right.
Those are like holidays in a certain sense. But every weekend, if you really wanted to, you could do something else. And that's kind of where I am with it.
I love that as a way to look at it, because I do think you're right. And I think that's where some of the weird, bad hot takes come from online that we talked about earlier is, you know, not my Luke Skywalker, whatever, not my story. Well, this one's not going to be for you, man. This was, and this is, Rogue One is really interesting. And I think you hit on something that I haven't thought about before. It really is sort of a fulcrum, if you will, of, no pun intended, of Star Wars storytelling, because without Rogue One, you don't get the Disney Plus shows because they don't know how to tell stories outside of that other piece. And honestly, it's another example. Nick and I talk about this all the time, or I say it all the time, is like Rogue One, Kenobi, Andor shows things that when I heard they were coming, I was like, do I need that story? And then they came out and I was like, wow, yeah, I needed that story. That was fantastic. It was a great way to look at Star Wars.
Right. And like, that's what kind of keeps me there. I don't need a bombastic moment every 3 years. I like it that much. You know what I mean? I can do weekly. And if I really want to get into this, there was a moment that really blew my mind, which I thought, and I still think, I should not speculate. That's not what I'm paid to do. But when there was a news network that showed up in the I was like, oh, what? Hold on. new storytelling device. Like we can just effectively make stuff up and introduce them via the news. That's not how anything has ever been presented in the galaxy before. It's always kind of hand to hand or whatever official communications, or somebody flies through the galaxy through something that's not supposed to be known. If there's just broadcast rights all over the place, Lord knows how this can expand. And so, listen, I'm just kind of being funny, but my point is that level of expansion to the point that you don't have to be all in on everything and like arguing with people about, you know, I don't know which Mandalorian marking you like the best. You can just live in the world, and that's a cool place. It's a cool neighborhood to live in, as opposed to a place you've got to buy in and have some wacky HOA that's going to screw your life up. You know what I mean? Like those things we've sort of advanced past, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of news and the way to tell things, I want to talk a little bit about Never Tell Me the Odds. Tell me a little bit of the story, because we haven't gotten the story from Arda. We haven't asked him. How do three guys from across ESPN find each other through this Star Wars connection? I want to hear the origin story of Never Tell Me the Odds.
I'm going to try to be slick about this because I'm television's Clinton Yates. Let's just say that there have been more wretched hives of scum and villainy, but the three of us happened to come together at the one that was Bristol, Connecticut, in the regards that is a place where I don't know that everybody thinks the Star Wars is cool. And so, you know, when various ideas were floated about this, that, and the third, I was tweeting all the time about how, you know, my sort of divorce from the everyday mainstream Star Wars fan base was official at this point. You know, we all kind of met up, and that's just sort of how it happened. We're like, what are we going to do? And it really helped that we all came from three different parts of the sports world. You know, Arda being a hockey guy, Ryan, obviously NASCAR god who covers college basketball, football, and baseball, which is how Ryan and I know each other best. That was my connectivity point. And I'm a baseball writer for the most part. So the linkages made sense. And we were all really happy to come together in the labor of love. And, you know, I don't know how to say this because I don't want to like be overly, it's not that it's braggadocious. We've just gotten to do some really cool things. And I'm really happy that we've all made the effort to make the show happen, because it's about at exactly all of our speeds for all the right reasons. Ryan OG saw 4, 5, 6 in the movie theater. Ryan is a guy that probably played. Arda is a guy that's probably played every story on the video game for sure. I'm the idiot that worked at Smithsonian, you know what I'm saying, and was fighting lightsabers with Field Yates on live TV. You know what I mean? So we had a nice blend of all of the different types of characters within ourselves that we brought with interest to everything. And so that was the main reason why it works. I've known Ryan for years. Working with Arda and meeting him has been a pleasure. And between Kelsey and Aaron, who are other members of the team, it's just been really fun.
Does the Disney ESPN relationship help? Obviously it does. In certain respects, you get to do some things, right? But how
does it help?
Does it?
Yeah, no, I was only looking
helps,
at the Falcon at 5 a.m. with nobody else there the other week in the glorious glow of the Florida moonlight. No, it helps. Trust me, brother. It helps. And to be honest, like, look, do I have some affiliation to anything other than what I feel about the storyline, company-wise or not? No, but yeah, it helps a lot, and that makes it more fun. As I said, I got a million things hanging around here. My apartment is seething and teething, whatever the word I'm looking for is. Tons of crap all the time. I don't mean crap. I mean like stuff that I get sent that I keep because I like it just from doing this job. There's no two ways about that. I'm not going to act like that's some sort of a lie, but at the same time, I would really I don't even know how to say this. Like, if I was a Star Wars fan and I didn't work for somebody else, it would be a bummer that I didn't get to do as much as I did. That's why I take it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm dead honest about that. Like, you get an invite to the Andor series premiere in Hollywood. Like, we're doing this, and that's cool. I don't know what else to say about that. Like, it's dope. I didn't engineer any of this, but I'm glad to be a part of it. And, I'm also not sort of scared of anything either. If the things I don't like are things I don't like. And that's happened plenty times. And I think that's also what the fun part about all of it is. I don't need everybody to like everything.
Sure.
I'm not that kind of a person. And if everybody did like everything, then nothing would be that interesting.
We want to do something fun here for a minute. Obviously, you cover a variety of sports at ESPN. This feels like the kind of thing that I could see you guys talking about doing, debating. We want to go around the horn, pun intended. And we're going to give you a position from each of the major sports, and we want you off the top to give us who from the Star Wars galaxy would fill that position or fill that role.
These are all going to be rogue. Hold on. You know what I'm going to do, actually? No, because I did this exercise with my friends. If you want to know how, this tweet is from July 28th, 2022. If you want to know how cool I am in my Star Wars group chat, we're currently chalk talking what would be the best Star Wars baseball lineups, forced adjusted, field positions included. It's a whole thing. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, nice. Well, we're going to start off NBA point guard. Who's going to be an NBA point guard out of the Star Wars galaxy?
NBA point guard. Young Anakin comes to mind in that situation. Very crafty, knows a lot, gets in and out of a lot of things. Assist game, very strong. Shorter stature. So probably, again, an assist first guy. Jump shot, questionable, but can hit it from deep, as we've seen from the pod races. Okay. So I'm just going to play along as the first things that come to mind. I'll go young Annie in that situation.
So is he giving Stockton vibes? Are we getting Scotty Skiles? What are we looking at?
Big
here?
Scott Skiles energy. I like that. Major Scott Skiles energy. In fact, obviously, again, excellent coach after the game up to a certain point. Again, the parallels are vicious.
It worked.
Nice. Let's fly over to the NFL. And who's your quarterback? Who's an NFL quarterback from Star Wars?
Probably Rex. You know what I'm saying? Like,
there you go.
Like, that he knows the plays. Will execute the calls. Certainly not going to sell out any other team members. Yeah, that's that. what's it called? Homecoming King, all that. We'll do all of that stuff and look the part as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great call.
I can see that. That works. Baseball, obviously a sweet spot for you.
Yeah.
Lots to think about, lots to consider. There's a key position in baseball that I think Star Wars can inform. Who is a closer? Who's a closing pitcher that's going to come in and wrap up a game?
So this is a very excellent question, because that's like the whole thing. Like arms are an issue in the galaxy. Okay, just like they are in the AL East. It's tough. Okay, to get good arms. Man, I got to think about that. Closer, I'm gonna go with Sal Guerrera. I feel like he's got stuff that, again, you don't know what's coming. He's one of those guys that comes out of the pen. You're like, okay, herky jerky delivery, not really sure what arm slot you're getting, and then you get the fastball in the third, and you're screwed. That's where I feel like he has a bit of a deceptive but aggressive tactic as a closer, which is kind of how you have to be. 2-pitch, third pitch, you're done. And he's the kind of guy that's able to execute that in terms of mystery and delivery, never mind stuff.
Right. Plus, he's got the ice in his veins, right? It doesn't matter the situation.
Right.
Yeah, he's going to be
temperament 80 grade. That's not even a question. That's the whole point. The stuff is what you're worried about, and he can execute.
And he's going to do it longer than you think he's supposed to. He's going to take 5 extra years and still be chucking away, still shutting people down.
This is why I'm here.
That's it.
Fantastic. All right. This is sort of the goofball on the team, the NHL goalie. Who's your goalie? A position that has changed over the years too. It used to be
very much so.
Yeah,
very much so. What's his nuts who gets his arm cut off? I don't like you either. That guy, I would put in my net.
Dr. Evazan, right?
Willing to risk quite a bit, face mangled as a result of a lot of time between the pipes. That guy is probably the closest character I mean, a lot of brushes with a lot of close things. Sometimes, I'm not saying that everybody's going to meet their maker playing between the pipes, but yes, the toughness level there is what I need from my kind of netminder person.
Well, and while the goalie isn't typically going to be the enforcer on your team, it's clear that he's going to throw down at a moment's notice.
I don't know how much hockey you've covered, but goalies bark, buddy. That's kind of why they're kind of good if they can get things. The best goalies are the best barkers. Personal opinion, having covered the game a little bit. I'm not saying that they're getting out there and mashing gloves, but yeah. You can't talk in a goalie. You're probably not a pretty good goalie.
Oh, talking for sure. Yeah. Throwing down's a different thing.
See, there's a Gen X thing again. I'm a Billy Smith, Ron Hextall guy. So those are the kings of the barking in those days. Those were the guys.
Right.
Just like have a good catcher in your ear while you're standing at the plate trying to get business done.
We're going to ask the catcher position question that I was definitely ready for, but it's not the same. It's okay.
That's right. It's different. Well, we're going to change it up again, and we're going to fly over to the PGA. Who's a Masters champion in the Star Wars galaxy?
Oh man, it's got to be Bail Organa. Like he's the veteran who wins. You know what I'm saying? It's not the young guy. It's the last major situation where he's kind of coming around, and you're like, "Oh, Senator, we remember you." We've had some great moments with you along the years as the tour on the tour. I don't know golf well enough to think of somebody who won a major that late in their career that I wish I could correlate this to. But that's who he could be, like a
Phil Mickelson kind of thing.
No, maybe? Phil too cocky. He was way too good, way too young. I don't mean that in a nasty way. I just mean I just.
Maybe Bale's got like a Jim Furyk thing going on.
There's an element of that. There's an element of
like
that.
Furyk.
Right, exactly.
Maybe he has a weird hitch in his swing.
Yeah, you're like, oh, good for him. Okay, he's still around.
Yeah. All right.
He's still available. Yep. He made a cut. Like, all right, sure, he can win a major. That's who I would think.
There you go.
Well, we were going to stop there, but I have to know who the catcher is now, especially because you had this list made earlier. Who do you get?
No brainer. This is an absolute no brainer. a Wookiee behind the dish means your team is winning everything. And yes, I'm talking about Chewie. No question asked. Are you crazy? Wookiee? What? No, it's I even. And this is gonna sound terrible because I've said this many times. Chewie is not like a character I loved growing up. I thought Chewie was very annoying on a lot of levels, but like as I sort of grew up, I was like, oh man, the Chuckster's been around. You know what I mean? Like it became more important to the story as far as canon was concerned later, and that actually changed how I felt about a lot of things. But excuse me, when we were at Galaxy's Edge at Walt Disney World, Chewie was one of the characters that came out. And, you know, look, as far as that experience is concerned, everybody who's done that says the same thing, which is like, if you go, you're going to love it. That's just all there is to it. And we got to interact with him. And it was kind of a full circle moment for me because, you know, I was never somebody that had a problem self-identifying as a Star Wars fan. I did not feel the need to add nerd to it. Like, this is who I am, bro, you know? And to be able to have that experience with Ryan and Arda and the rest of the, you know, the Never Tell Me the Odds podcast crew, like seeing Chewie walk out under the Falcon, I was like, oh, okay. Okay. Yes, this is why I'm here. And I don't just mean that in terms of where I work and what I do. I mean, in terms of a storyline that I've invested effectively my life in. It was really cool to see something unfold like that, you know, sort of in front of you. And look, all of the cast members of Disney who make that exhibit happen and all of the people that like have worked to make sure that the sort of consumer part of Star Wars is something that still exists, I think is an underrated part of this entire operation. Like, dog, do you know what kind of function it takes to keep everybody's fanhood satisfied? Do you understand what they're doing every day and every night? You think the NFL's got something going? Yeah, they do. But like they don't have to make it up. You know what I mean? And that's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily have the grasp of. And honestly, the cool part is that they don't have to. Like it's all there. You can dive in it, you know, and you can sleep there and it'll be fun.
Well, Clinton, man, this has been like the most fun we've had on the show in a while. Guys. This has been fantastic. Tell people where they can find the show and where they can keep up with you.
Never Tell Me the Odds, ESPN's official Star Wars podcast, where you can get all of your podcasts. So search it. Myself, Arda Okal, and Ryan McGee. And of course, you can find me on all of your platforms at Clinton Yates, or if you're on TikTok, if you're nasty, Yates Clinton.
Well, thank you much, Clinton. This was fantastic, and we hope to talk to you again soon sometime.
This is the way.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Around the Galaxy. Thanks to Clinton Yates, and thank you for listening. If you had fun, please like, subscribe, share, rate, and review it. If you had a lot of fun and want to be part of the live virtual audience for future episodes, please consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/the SSW Network. This episode has been copyright 2024 Pete in the Seat Studios, and our music is by the band Apollo's Ghost.